Thanks, everyone. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all. Most of the people on stage here are likely engineers by training and background, so you may be wondering why a product manager is coming here to talk to you. Well, I'd like to think it's because I'm an inspiring speaker, that I'm an interesting and engaging talker, but the truth is, as you all know, engineering time is really, really valuable, and they don't have time to spend writing speeches. So they sent me. But I'll explain why our engineers are working on such valuable content. So to move forward, this is what banking leaders look like in 1999. And there's nothing wrong with it. They're pretty cool. Top of the building. They are encouraged by primarily one KPI, and that is to make money. The problem with that KPI is it's great for a bonus check, but it does not improve technology. It doesn't improve things for users. And just a question to all of you. How many people here are motivated by making things easier, by optimization, by efficiency? Yeah, everyone. It is why engineers build things. So I'm going to put you all in pain. I'm going to put you all in pain in a couple of different industries. My background is in payments. I spent the last 13 years making things not suck in payments. I'm about to spend the next 13 years making things not suck in tax. But here's what it looks like when payments suck. So in Brazil in 2020, so this wasn't years ago, this was 2020, in order to buy a subscription on Netflix, you had to open your laptop. You had to get a code after you went through the sign-up process and write it down. I mean, maybe you had a printer, but probably not. Then you walked to a store around the corner, maybe further away. You stand in line. This is a digital process, everyone, fully digital onboarding. You give the cashier your code. Hopefully you didn't make a mistake writing it down. The cashier types in your code, probably 3 or 4 times. And then you pay in cash. Cashier records your payment. After that, you go home with your confirmation that you hopefully wrote down properly. You type it in and make a few mistakes along the way, and then finally, you enjoy a month of movies, because next month you're doing it again. That's what pain looks like before engineers get involved. Engineers fixed it. So in 2021, they created a process and a product called Pix. You open the app on your phone, you do a redirect to Pix, you pay digitally, and enjoy movies. That's it. 30 seconds. And it securely stored your payment for every subsequent payment thereafter. That's what fixing it looks like. When you fix stuff like this, it goes nuts. 1 year after Pix was launched, 50% of adults in Brazil used it. 3 years after, 90% of adults use it. The old way, boleto, is effectively dead. And this is what banking leaders look like in 2024. Does anyone know who they are? Who are these guys? The founders of Stripe. Both engineers. Tax is even worse off than finance. Poor Milton. They're not at the top of the building, they're at the bottom of the building. They're very often the last to be told that a country is being launched by an Uber or an Airbnb. And they can't find their stapler. Here's why it hurts so bad. Today, in tax, having a conversation like this with a customer was really common. We would load a desktop app It was built in 2015, but it looks like it was built in 1995. They spend an entire month uploading CSVs. In order to file, the app turns the CSVs into PDFs. By the way, that's what constitutes digital in the tax space. Then they upload them to a government website and repeat this 500 times. Then they have to tell their company they did this. So they report on it by exporting these PDFs as CSVs again. They upload it into their probably Excel on their personal laptop or their desktop. They create a new report in Excel and then make a PDF of the report to share with executives, with auditors, and so forth. They probably email it without encryption. And then they do it all again next month. That's how bad things are in tax today. It's 500 hours for what, to all of you, probably seems like a process you could automate tomorrow. That's why they look like this. So let's help them out. Let's get them out of the basement and help Milton find his stapler. So this is how, at least we are fixing it with engineers. At Fonoa, we're using data pipelines. These data pipelines are pulling and streaming data from multiple sources in real time. We're cleaning, validating, and formatting that content in milliseconds, not days or months. And then we use APIs to report at a transaction level. We're building our own databases. So this is one of the best parts that my CTO and I feel is about creating new technology, is that you all as engineers, you all have the best tools. Why do engineers always have the best tools? It's because you guys can make your own tools. Tax managers can't make their own tools. Financial planners cannot make their own tools. So you guys can build your own tools. So we're creating our own database, our own query language. We're developing plugins to make that a standard that's accessible to any other system. And then using machine learning to spot and fix errors. And that way you don't have to report on anything, because errors aren't happening. So take a process that took 500 hours, and you drop it down to less than 4. Awesome. And then this is what tax managers will look like in a couple of years. They'll look like the rest of us. So why is this necessary? Why is this happening right now? Well, taxes usually follow revenue. So over the last 10 years, there's been a massive unlocking of revenue. In 2014, business was generally local. It was generally hosted locally. Within just the last 10 years, most businesses, if you were to start up a software business today, you'd host it globally. It would be a cloud service business, available and accessible anywhere. You would collect payments globally. You would see customers globally. And then over the next 6 years, as blockchains become more viable, as we can do accounting in real time, and ultimately as AI starts to do things like, well, today it's creating content, I think within a few years they'll start creating their own businesses. So you'll have synthetic identities creating synthetic products, selling possibly to synthetic people. But all of that requires tax. As soon as revenue starts to be created, governments start to seek how to collect it in tax. So governments are catching up. What do? About 2 years ago, they started telling the platforms, look, you're responsible for every Uber driver's tax. Airbnb, you're responsible for every host's tax. Not the host, not the driver, who are independent contractors. They're not employees of Uber, they're not employees of Airbnb, but the platforms are responsible. So what happened is they started creating APIs in order to pull this data in. They started to modernize the tax collection system. But the industry wasn't ready for it. I will tell you, it's a pretty sad state of affairs when governments are innovating faster than private industry. This is why engineers are needed. Because those running the industry today, the consulting firms, nothing against them, they understand tax very well, they're paid by the hour. Going back to the banker example, these aren't the right incentives to build good technology. The existing technology was built or founded in 1978. It's a little bit like those that were doing software licensing that had to figure out how the cloud revolution worked. They're not ready. And the tech startups, and this is really important, the tech startups lack domain knowledge. So all of you know how to code, all of you know how to create process efficiency, but you need to work with experts in the domain. You need yourselves to become curious and experts in the domain. So if all of you are looking to think about, like, what's the next big business? You missed the boat on cloud, you missed the boat on payments, you may be feeling like you missed the boat on AI. I'm telling you, we're still creating the boat in tax. If you're looking for the next industry to work in, follow Reid Hoffman's advice. It's not about looking for a market without competition. It's looking for a market that's very valuable, that has bad competition. Swim into a red ocean, just make sure the sharks are idiots. So this is where your talents are needed. What is an engineering mindset? How do you apply it to an industry like this? Number one, all the best engineers I work with do not ignore, are not frustrated by, but they embrace constraints. The second is that, as I've mentioned a few times before, you build your own tools. You have the capacity to do that. The others in the industry, tax managers, cannot build their own tools. You guys can build your own tools. The next one is that you actually measure success. It isn't enough to just hand wave and say, we'll solve that for you. You actually measure, if you build something, does it work? And lastly, you ignore the haters. So very often when you start to revolutionize an industry, it's going to look pretty weird. And let me give you some examples of what that kind of strange experimentation can look like. So I think it was 2014, the best engineer on my team got hired away by Amazon. Bastards. But he did something really cool with it. What they asked him to do was come on board and fix a problem for us. We need a machine that's 20 meters away to recognize your voice despite all the other noises happening in the room. And to do that, the data scientist said, well, we need 10 years of data. And Amazon had a year to launch. That's all. That was his mission. With an engineering mindset, he started to ask himself, what are my constraints? Well, time, capacity, budget. What tools do I need? Simulation rooms, speech recognition software, mechanical Turks. How can I employ it? And he created an experiment in the end. It was the weirdest experiment ever. He had people come in, temps off the street, walk into a room. It was a white room. It had speakers along the walls. They couldn't see them because they were in front of a white panel. They sat at a desk and spoke into a microphone in whatever accent they came with. So he hired a lot of people with a lot of different accents and just read scripts, hours and hours, days upon days, for an entire year. In 1 year, he had 10 years worth of data and was able to program a machine to recognize people's voices from afar because the speakers were playing washing machines, people talking in the background, games, loud noises, kids. This room must have looked so weird. People questioned him all year long. But when the data came out and they proved the model worked, people stopped questioning. Ignore the haters. We're doing the same thing in tax. There are thousands of municipalities that are creating their own rules. There's tens of thousands of products. So just the combination alone requires a graph database of some kind to handle the combinations. Tax codes are written by lawyers. Lawyers speak in dozens of languages and write the tax code not to be readable, not to be standardized, but in fact, often the opposite. When we asked a company to help us actually look at all the existing tax code and boil it down to something that we could read with machines and update with machines, they said it would take us 8 years with a team of 10 tax managers. We have a year to launch. We can't wait 8 years. Our customers can't wait 8 years. So we're starting to use large language models to actually read what lawyers have written. We're using recursive retrieval and data streaming to pull what we're reading back into our system and interpret it, at which point we're using GraphDBs to start to understand how this data is connected and make it highly accessible. Engineers figuring out how to solve the problem. The hate will come from every tax manager will say, but I need compliance. Compliance is 100% compliant. It does me no good to be 98% compliant. And this is something that you guys need to just communicate over and over. You're not solving the entire problem or every problem. You're solving for routine. You solve for the things that happen over and over again. There's no risk. There's plenty of standardization. You just find the patterns. And then you have humans do the other 20%. Perfectly fine. Always have a driver that can take over. The idea here is start small, solve more and more of the routine problems, increase that percentage as far as you can, but start small. If you build it, they will come. So within 2 years of launch, these are the brands that we work with, so I can just attest. They're desperate for this. If you guys are looking for the next big thing, these brands should tell you that's where it is. I'd be a pretty bad product manager if I didn't remind you that just building it is not enough. Out of curiosity, has anyone here been an entrepreneur before? So not just built code, but actually launched their own company before? A handful. Well, first of all, let me inspire you. Remember back to the slide I said that businesses can be launched now globally very quickly with better tooling, better payment acceptance. This is your chance. But I will remind you that building it is not enough. Just keep these tips in mind. It will help. You need to delight your customers in hard-to-copy, margin-enhancing ways. This comes from Gibson Biddle. He was the VP of product for Netflix and CPO of Chegg, an edutech software company. But absolutely the right goals. And it comes down to simple questions. Whose problem are you solving? How do you measure it? The good news is these are questions that in your engineering process you're probably already solving. The most important question in that is, how are you solving something uniquely? It's not enough to solve a problem. You have to be doing something unique. And lastly, that unique improvement needs to be measurable. So you have the whole problem that you're solving, and then what are you uniquely solving? So if you keep that in mind, usually you can find a price tag for your value and create a company out of it. Building is not enough. The engineering mindset is crucial, but building is not enough. Has anyone here heard the podcast 20VC? Strongly recommend it. If you ever want to start a business or you're curious what's involved, 20VC is a great podcast. But Jean-Michel Lemieux, he was the VP of product at Atlassian, then the CTO of Shopify, said something really profound recently, which is you're not building products, you build a movement. Movements don't just require product, it's also process, it's also people. So just make sure that you're covering the bases with people around you. Connect with people here, connect with professionals in your field, connect with domain experts. Build a movement. And for that movement, Fonoa needs you. Companies in tax need you. Build your own applications in tax. I strongly encourage you to research the industry, find out small problems to solve, build tooling to solve them, launch them, experiment. Because we got to get Milton out of the basement. It's time for him to get to the top floor. So We hope you join us on this movement or build your own things, but in the end, see you out there with better tools. Thanks a lot.